Yeah, greetings and welcome, dear guests. I'm BATUHAN, one of the moderators, and this is 13th online session of Democracy University ALTI Student Club. Before the session begins, please turn off your microphones. Thank you. So today's topic is about humanizing learning, trauma-informed teaching in virtual classroom by our precious guest, Dr. PERİ YÜKSEL. She's joining us from New Jersey University.
Hello again, everyone. I am BEGÜM ATSAN, student of the ALTI department at IZMIR Democracy University. And let me now give you some brief information about the session. The moderator is Dr. NURDAN KAVAKLI, who is also our academic advisor at ALTI department. This session is about 20-25 minutes long, and the QA sessions will be held by QA managers, me and my friend BATUHAN ATEŞ. You may prefer to shoot your questions in chat box, or you may use your mics if eligible. Also, at the end of our session, we will take a family picture. We will inform you when it's time to turn your cameras on. Now, we would like to kindly invite Dr. NURDAN KAVAKLI to start off the 13th session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my dear students, BATUHAN and BEGÜM, who are going to be today's Q&A managers to help Dr. PERİ YÜKSEL. I feel more than happy today. You know me, guys, I am NURDAN KAVAKLI, because today I'm going to be hosting my dear friend and also my colleague from New Jersey University from the States, who is actually Dr. PERİ YÜKSEL. Just a couple of words to say before I leave the stage to her is that we met online. I think it was 1.5 years ago, right? And it was something like ResearchGate or Academia. I cannot remember the exact place.
ResearchGate.
ResearchGate. So it was about making citations and being reference for someone else's work. So I was one of the references for your work about Laz, right? An endangered language in Turkey. So it was just a really nice gathering for all of us. Then our friendship goes so long, and today we are going to be hosting Dr. PERİ YÜKSEL as our guest speaker from the States. Thanks to her very precious words to me and my dear students, we are going to talk about how to humanize learning, and the special concern will be on trauma-informed teaching in the virtual classrooms. So please welcome my precious guest. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much for having me here and for inviting me. And I'm just thrilled to have this opportunity to talk with you about trauma-informed teaching. Mind, it's an ongoing process. You don't learn it overnight. It takes, passion, commitment, and experience to be in the classroom and to apply what you have learned, what worked, what didn't work. So I welcome you to my talk, Humanizing Learning, Trauma-Informed Teaching in the Virtual Classroom. Can we go to the next slide, please? So just a quick overview, and I promise I will be under 20 minutes. I usually teach whatever I'm going to teach you throughout the whole semester, but I'll try to pack everything in a very compact version. So we'll talk about the current state of trauma. Trauma is social. Trauma is global. And how trauma affects the brain, how trauma affects behavior, particularly in the classroom, since I know from Dr. KAVAKLI, my dear virtual friend, that you are pre-service teachers, and some of you might be actually in the field and you have seen some possible signs, but we will talk about that each individual is different. We cannot generalize. Then I'll give you some tips on trauma-informed teaching, and you can chip in. Maybe you already have experience with some of the approaches. We'll talk about outlooks, future directions of our profession, and hopefully we'll have time for Zoom questions. So, trauma is global. Some facts about it. A traumatic event is defined as an actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violence. Such incidents can be you can be directly exposed to it or indirectly, directly by being the victim of sexual, physical, emotional abuse, or even parental neglect or neglect by a partner, as well as experiencing somebody's experience of a trauma, like indirectly hearing about somebody's horrific death or horrific car accident, plane accident, and so on. So globally, more than 70% of adults have experienced trauma. This is based on the World Health Organization's mental health survey across over 25 countries. 70% have experienced at least one incident of trauma throughout their life. Big number. The World Health Organization estimates that at least 40 million children under the age of 15 are victims of violence each year. Usually when we talk about children, we really talk from 0 to 18, but this was a study just focusing on 15 and below. So this translates, if you do the math, that 54% of the world's children have experienced adverse childhood experiences in the form of physical, psychological, emotional, sexual abuse, but also including witnessing some type of violence due to relational interactions, such as domestic violence at home or violence in the neighborhood or in the community. Also natural disasters and, of course, conflicts such as war, ongoing war. So remember I sent you the ACE quiz, you took probably a couple days ago, 25 students participated. So the ACE, and I also sent you a debriefing email, and I think Dr. KAVAKLI shared it with you. So the ACE score is a tally of hostile childhood experiences, including abuse, neglect, and household dysfunctioning, and as well as some kind of, neighborhood dysfunctioning or disorganization. As we know, just recently, the first ACE study was actually published about Turkish university students. Dr. Betül Ulukul, just had a new. She actually ran the study, and they recruited university students across 7 different universities in Turkey, and they found out that actually 49% of Turkish university students experienced at least one type of ACE. So the higher your score of ACE, like went through ongoing, the more psychological damage a child might experience, and this translates to weaker learning opportunities, but we'll talk more about that. So child abuse is invisible, but exists in every society around the globe. Are you guys interested how many ACEs we had in your group of 25 students? As it turns out, 19% experience at least one type of ACE. So number is lower than the overall population in Turkey, but mind you, this was just a very small sample. So here you see the world at a glance quickly. So where am I getting these numbers? Obviously from, UN numbers. So around 70 million people are forcibly displaced, meaning that 1% of the world's population are now refugees. Turkey, as you know very well, you live in the country, you breathe everything that's happening, is the biggest, one of the top humanitarian host countries with 3.7 million Syrian refugees. Trauma-related psychosocial problems affecting refugee parents also impact children's overall well-being directly or indirectly. We know that every human has mirror neurons. Every mammal has mirror neurons. If somebody is experiencing pain, somebody's experiencing happiness, joy, fear, we somehow can relate to it because we can empathize. We can really feel how another person is experiencing that very moment. So 85% of Syrian children living in Turkey are haunted by the memories of war. As it turns out, 40% of Syrian children between the ages of 5 and 17 are without access to school due to various reasons. And I'm sure you're aware of it because I found out that you have actually a community center right in IZMIR. There are only 15, 15, but you have one in IZMIR. So because disability, because access, you know, the more remotely the camp is of the Syrian refugees, the harder it is, or cultural interpretation of whether a child should go to school or not, you know, like child marriage or engagement or doing some housework around the house. So some of these Syrian children might be sitting in your future high school classes, middle school classes, college classes, or already you are teaching some of them. I don't know, maybe we can discuss that. So again, we live in a world where one person is forcibly displaced roughly every 2 seconds. Let's digest that and go to the next slide. So trauma affects and changes the brain. So within the first years of human development, the brain is undergoing rapid, explosive growth and change, and thereby is relatively vulnerable to any kind of dysfunctional, hostile, aggressive experiences. So when a child is deprived of essential, stimulating social interactions, like sits for hours in front of the TV or plays with the internet, you shouldn't do that. Not under the age of 18 months or 2 years. You shouldn't give any child technology. We can talk about that. And a child is enduring disorganized, unpredictable, and abusive, neglectful experiences. This is affecting the structures of the brain. And also it affects the limbic system. So the limbic system sits on top of the reptilian brain. The reptilian brain is just a basic brain. I don't know how much you know, but I don't want to give you a lecture, but it's really for basic functioning, like me just sitting here talking to you and making sure I don't talk in German. So, I mean, that's more the neocortex inhibiting. So the neocortex is the neural layer. And between the reptilian brain and the neocortex, sometimes also called the frontal cortex, you probably know about it, the decision-making center, is the limbic system, which actually regulates our behavior and emotions, is also responsible for learning. So the link between the limbic system and the cortex, the motor cortex, which is in the neocortex, the neural layer, is pivotal for the reward system and information. So this means that these pathways reinforce behavior and disruption, learning is jeopardized. So here you see a list of some possible trauma signs, but I made a tiny remark up there to remind us all that we need to know that if we met one traumatized individual, we have just only met one traumatized individual. So, and the impact of the ACE damage depends on multiple factors, such as at what age the child was exposed to it. Is it ongoing? How forceful was it? What kind of complex other stressors are involved? Whether the individual or the child, the family actually had access to services, mental health services, and also resources, like community resources, such as positive parenting, and so on. So let's look at some of the signs that we know that the brain is altered and changes. And the more the child is actually living and breathing in a toxic environment, the more damage you see actually in CAT scans and brain scans, that smaller brain size and also lower activity. Academic performance, lower GPA could be possible, or inconsistency. You might see one child doing very great or one college student very great in one class, very low in another class. And you would see these spikes of, grades and performances, high rate of absence and dropout, decreased reading ability, attention, memory, cognition can affect that area. So you need a lot of patience, maybe explain in a loving, caring voice rather than in an authoritarian voice, which they have probably experienced at home. And again, this traumatic events might be triggered, and concentration and any other cognitive abilities might shut down. Reduced focus, disorganization is possible, and interference with effective problem solving, because the the prefrontal cortex is also responsible to plan ahead, make decisions, to make proper judgments. This can be greatly compromised. So avoidance behavior, such as you're planning field trips and suddenly this one traumatized that you don't know about this child doesn't really want to go on the trip because maybe something happened on that particular place, or it might remind that particular child on something that might happen, that might have happened to the child. It also affects the social performance because classrooms, universities, any kind of learning environments, daycare centers, they're also social environments where we have to perform socially. We have to practice our intersocial skills. So a child who has had no positive interaction with adults or siblings, older siblings, obviously will have a distrust. Will have difficulty to like other people. So we'll have difficulty with any authority person, such as the teacher in the class or the group leader or the director. So, and we'll also have difficulty with redirecting their behavior or thoughts and also criticism. So less flexibility in both, showing social cues and responding to them. Sometimes you might even see a student who's not even responding at all to your jokes. Okay, that's understandable, but not even to, horrific experiments. Like I do that sometimes in psychology. We show our shameful past experiments, and we have learned from the past to be more ethical towards research participants. And sometimes I see no movements or no reactions. Could have many other reasons. So we shouldn't jump the gun. We shouldn't jump the trigger. So there might be some over or under reaction to physical contact. Don't touch me. If you were just telling a student, can you please move aside, and you slightly touched him or her on the shoulder, don't do that. They could really freak out. You never know. And also like slamming the door or loud music suddenly, or sometimes even your voice. I have a loud voice because I come from a big family and my ancestors were mountain people. So we had to, project our voice a lot. So sometimes you have to maybe talk in a very, softer voice, use your volume. And sudden movements could also put them astray. Emotional numbing, inability to maintain interpersonal relationships. But this might also continue to romantic relationships, outside of any institutional setting, private things. Anxiety, worrying about oneself, and also traumatized children, if they like a teacher, they get very attached to you. So you must understand that you are really like the secure base now for them. There's nothing wrong with that, but allow them to also like become independent. So the good news is that the human brain is plastic and amenable. So that with support, especially from teachers, you can really make resilient students with also trauma-informed care. So let's talk about trauma-informed care. 3 pillars. There are basically a lot of approaches, but what I like about this approach by Beth, published in 2008, there are 3 pillars consisting of safety, connections, and managing emotions. Let's look at them closer. So, safety is a core fundamental human need. The moment we are born, we're so dependent on our parents, right? On our caregivers. So, and throughout the first years, the child has to either create trust or mistrust, according to Erikson's theory on human development. So your job is to first of all think about, why did you choose this profession? What is your teaching philosophy? What do you intend to do? You're a human being now in a classroom, sometimes maybe in a virtual classroom, depending on the situation we will be living in. So you have to create from the start a teaching atmosphere to students to feel physically, intellectually, socially, and emotionally secure and safe. And throughout the whole semester, academic year, your job is to maintain that atmosphere that is consistent, reliable, predictable, caring, honest, and transparent. Sometimes professors or teachers make a mistake. We don't know all the answers to all the brilliant questions that students have. Rather than saying, oh, just, you know, we would say, well, I don't know, let's look it up together, you know, like become the engine that you can really look into research together. Establish routines for learning to stick and invite students to co-create their own learning. You know what the easiest routine is actually? Come into class, doesn't matter if it's a morning class, evening class, or Sunday class, just come with a smile and end the class with a smile, because it really nurtures and pushes learning and motivates students. Include the whole student in the decision-making process and allow students to make choices and have some control over their lesson. And this issue about control is very important in traumatized children, because so much of their human rights, their dignity has been given away that they had really no power over anything, even like sometimes eating food. Can you imagine? I mean, they're like stories that you would be like, what just happened to caregiving? But we shouldn't only blame the parents. We will talk about it. I'm sure you will have tons of questions, because my students always have questions about parents, the guilty ones. We'll talk. Don't blame our parents. They're trying their best. So engage students in metacognition. Metacognition is coming from the learning science, and it means like thinking about thinking. I do that quite often with my students in the beginning of class, mid-semester, and at the end of class. So what did you learn? And this fosters really self-awareness and meaning-making over the course content, and motivates students to really learn more. So be a role model and lead students to build resilience by creating a safe learning environment. The next pillar, connections. I didn't have space, so it's like connect, but it means connections. So connections provide students a wide range of possibilities for integrative, positive learning, you know, interactive, active learning, different synonyms. So integrating reflective tasks such as 1-minute papers at the end of the class. Okay, what did you learn? What kind of questions do you have? Was there something I missed to mention, or was there something you were shy to ask in class? Because personality is also wide range, you will see. Dynamic of each, even if you're teaching the same section, you will see so much different dynamics and personalities. And that's the fun part of our job, right? You never know what to expect. So journal keeping is also great for self-reflective assignments, self-assessment, and so on. Meaningless material. And remember, don't we need to self-assess ourselves, especially when we leave high school or college and we want to go on the job market and they're asking us, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? So, you know, we have to do it no matter what, even as, you know, adults later on after school. So practicing self-assessments allows students to connect to the learning community and what to expect beyond school and college. Building group activities, and I'm sure you do tons of group activities with my dear friend NURDAN, and into the lesson plan, and allowing students to establish self-chosen. Again, very important, this control issue, you know, choice control. Allow the entire class to choose with whom they want to mingle with and become, you know, team partners. It takes time. It's not easy. My students hate group work, but I've learned over the years not to rush and just give them like the first couple of weeks of the semester or 3 weeks. Okay, mingle, do Zoom chats, do this and that. Nowadays we can do so much. We don't have to be physically in the same classroom. We can still connect and learn so much from each other. So, and all these, like teaming up, fosters trust, academic engagement, and intellectual growth. And it might be contagious. If you are putting a weaker student with a stronger student, they will find a middle ground. So, and the weaker student will learn so much, because students communicate differently than professors with students. So foster a sense of belonging, very important, especially during times of physical distancing. Creating an online learning community is key. So know your students very well from the beginning. Take your time, ask them what's your hobby, what's your favorite color, and so on. Help them connect to the content of their learning situation. The last pillar, managing emotions or regulating emotions. So the ability to self-regulate or manage emotions is one of the most fundamental factors for a healthy development across the lifespan. Look at you all. You're great in regulating your behavior. I mean, I see some faces here in live video screaming, and you regulate, right? But for a child who has been traumatized, who hasn't really had the opportunity to talk about excitement, to talk about surprises in their lives, to talk about their fears, it's very difficult to sit even for 45 minutes, 20 minutes in a class setting. Engage students in writing or role play when they can explore individually or collaboratively their emotions and find words for their feelings. So labeling is very important. Expressing, communicating about the inner world. Consciously labeling troublesome emotions has a direct calming effect on those emotions, as we found out in some research studies. Involving students in active listening tasks, such as class discussions or small group assignments, to helps them learn about their peers' feelings and also develop perspective taking. And in turn, it strengthens empathy. So active listening can promote self-awareness, going back to the safety issue, to the connection issue and the two pillars, and helps students narrate their own experiences and find a voice that holds the learning community together. Finally, they can really talk about themselves. Maybe everything has been suppressed, and if they feel safe and secure, this might be your starting point to talk with a very trustable person, might be you. Actually, 68% or close to over 60%. Oh, 5 minutes left? Okay, good. So storytelling is powerful. Stay emotionally connected and motivate your students. Okay, next slide. Yeah, I'm sorry. So feedback is very important. So there's this practice mutual fidelity feedback. I think frequently give them feedback, also get feedback from them immediately, right after an assignment or after class. Ask them, how did I do? And tell them how they did. Discriminating, right? Use rubrics, use criteria standards that are early established in the class, and give feedback in a loving or supportive way. Give them stickers, send them some animations. Now easy with the virtual. So nurture fidelity for student-centered learning. Next one. And I'm almost done. So outlook. Currently, we are actually, the whole world is experiencing ongoing traumatic stress due to COVID-19. And we don't know what will come out of it, but something will come out of it. So we haven't experienced the combination of all these 6 different points: social distancing, loneliness, right? In connection with daily death and infection reports on a mass scale, and we cannot even go to funerals. We cannot even share and hug persons. Economic crisis. We don't know how big it's going to be. Ongoing existential fears, ongoing daily stress of social isolation, uncertainty of feeling hopelessness. So my takeaway message with this trauma-informed learning in the classroom is that everybody's involved. Every stakeholder in the education system needs to provide feedback, this fidelity feedback, in a loving and caring way. Next one. Well, here you see the restored Ephesus Theater, and it's 1 hour away from you guys, which says that with strong pillars based on sound pedagogically approaches, we can actually create and restore any environment within new norms. So I would like to ask someone to read one of my favorite quotes by Kant, and this is my last slide. And Kant's categorical principle of morality is actually the notion to start thinking about universal human rights. Can somebody read it? Begüm?
Yeah, I can. I will about to open my microphone. Act in such a way that you always treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of any other, never simply as a means, but always at the same time as an end. Kant's categorical principle of morality.
So what does it mean? In other words, treat humans and not as objects. So thank you so much for listening. I think my next slide is just the references. Yeah, my references. And if we have 1 minute, I actually put couple of books. I always do that in my class. Whenever I lecture, I'll bring some books, you know. The first one, if you're really interested into trauma and going deeper into the science of trauma, The Body Keeps the Score. Amazing book. Amazing book. It's great. It's a little bit thicker. The other one, it's easier to read. It's a little bit thinner. And I read it as a textbook in my class, in my advanced human development class. My students love it. I think 98% love it. I just had a couple of students who said, no, I hate the book. But they have all their preferences. Great book. And another one, which is relatable to the virtual classroom, by Lange. He's actually an English professor, so very close to your field. And he wrote Small Teaching, but he also wrote, together with Flower Darby, Small Teaching Online. So there's the sequence. 2016, he had the Small Teaching, and now Small Teaching Online. I highly recommend. This is just a newly released book. And if there's another minute, I would like to share my favorite poem with you, and especially in times of physical distancing, we need to be socially close, and we can do that with various tools that technology has brought us, such as Zoom as today, or FaceTime. And it's very important to regulate with people who, you know, can help us to go through these very, very difficult times. Can somebody read Rumi? Batuhan? I assume?
Yes, I can read them. Rumi, the guest house. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house, empty of its furniture. Still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Thank you, Batuhan.
You're welcome.
So, can we open the Zoom platform for questions?
Yes, of course. So first of all, thank you very much for this very informative and fruitful session. I hope we can meet again to host you more than maybe an hour, right? Because it's not enough to just talk about traumatized learning and the students who are having these kind of troubles in schools or in class.
We can run a class together.
Of course, why not?
That would be fun, actually.
Yes,
you know?
Of course. My students are going to read your codes. Then you can just give us the information. It's going to be like collaborative, right?
Definitely.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
By the way, before we start with the questions, I think we have lots of questions, but we need to take our family photo first. So,
oh yeah,
proceed so that we can take our family photo. So I'm going to take the picture. Okay. Be ready. Okay, one more time. Okay, now it is time for questions, and my QA managers are going to hold this session for you. Thank you one more time, PERİ.
Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And this was actually my first time in front of a Turkish university. So yes. It was a breeze to come from your university, from New Jersey City University. And I see my student, Maida. I see a familiar face. Hey, Maida.
So now time for questions.
Okay, ma'am. First one is coming from Talha Erdalı. Is it possible to erase a memory? If so, can it be a useful way for us to get rid of traumas so that we can learn better?
It's tough to answer. It depends again on the type of trauma, the person. Obviously,
the brain is structured in a way which helps us to forget the bad stuff, unless something else triggers us, and we don't know. You might be, you know, going to buy ice cream and suddenly the smell of the air triggers. It's very hard to say. Maybe it happens in Hollywood where you can erase some memories, but I think we are so complex as humans. We walk and breathe and we have all these sensual memories, you know, that it's very difficult. But some people are very great in denying that something happened. And lately, I mean, this is not my field of expertise, trauma, but since I became an educator and reading my students, especially my first year students, papers on resilience, which I always do in the end of the class, I read so many horrific stories about their past childhood that I said, I'm doing something wrong in this classroom. I have to really make them feel more comfortable and safe. So over the years, I've developed, you know, different methods and learned about how to approach it. But I think,
Ma'am, sorry, thank you for the answer, but we are running out of time and we have to end the session. So you can send your questions by mail. Thank you for the participations. Begüm, please end the session.
Yeah, thank you one more time for joining us and sharing our excitement today. Our special thanks go to Dr. PERİ YÜKSEL and hope to see you again. Please follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook as EDU ELT for the